Big Trouble, Little Planet. A fanfiction by Flynn. Huh, it's about Knuckles. I wonder if this will expose him for having an anti-kidnap bias. We start out with Knuckles waking up from his nap, stretching and yawning, lifting himself from the Master Emerald and cracking his back. So he was literally sleeping on top of it? That wouldn't be a comfortable resting place. This is one of the many things that are hard to believe about the stereotypical portrayal of how Knuckles should be by fans. Not only is it hard to buy that he put up with something as boring as guarding an emerald all day with no company, but he wouldn't put up with having no bed, and I doubt he had a pillow either. And with the altar of the emerald being so hard-looking in SA1, I doubt it's that comfortable to be on. He's not relatable like that. As he starts going down the stairs of the altar, for what I can only assume is his attempt at a bathroom break, because the story won't explain why he's leaving, he accidentally steps on a Chow napping in his path because he's tired. Okay, it is more plausible that he put up with guarding an emerald all day if he had a Chow to constantly pet and cuddle, and it'd be sweet to see him do that. The Chow starts crying and he picks it up right away. Sadly, we aren't immediately told about him comforting it, because the narration gets distracted talking about how chaos is at the bottom of the altar disguised as water, which ripples and churns because of the crying Chow, and Chaos Zero rises out of it, and begins to go up the stairs. You know, this would be the best explanation for how Chaos got released ever. It takes advantage of how Chaos cares about Chow. It's a shame that Chow came out of nowhere in the lore of SA1. Not to mention that, unless the Mystic Ruins Chow Garden was a part of Angel Island itself, there's no indication Chow existed on Angel Island itself. But yeah, this is a much more logical explanation for how SA1 started than the lazy-ass lightning strikes the emerald from Sonic X, where it realistically would have just destroyed it. But I still have a soft spot for how Archie explained it as Tikal had to seal away Chaos in a black gem, and Eggman hit it with a hammer to get Chaos out. At least there, they made up some brand new lore to be creative, and Eggman had to earn getting Chaos. Still though, it's shockingly uncreative that even in his fanfiction, Flynn tends to rip off the stories of the games. In the last one I talked about, he ripped off Shadow's Fall to Earth, and now he's ripping off the start of Knuckles' story, when I naturally expected something totally new. So that's always confusing for fanfiction. When Chaos reaches the top of the staircase, he sees a very content Chow being rocked gently in the arms of Knuckles, who even croons an improvised lullaby that he somehow knows. I guess the Master Emerald taught him a lullaby. What's croon mean? Hum? That's pretentious. Why can't he just write hum? But it was sweet to read about Knuckles like this. The Chow goes back to sleep and is set down, so I wonder if Chaos will go attack Knuckles anyways, despite seeing that he clearly cared about Chow and learned his lesson. Fortunately, logic prevails and it returns to his liquid state as Knuckles glides ahead for a while. Where was he going? And why? The writing's too lazy to tell us why he's leaving the Master Emerald. He drops to his feet scared when he sees that the sky over the landmass Angel Island's approaching is full of purple and black clouds. Pollution? In the center, a tornado sucks itself high into space. The inside of the cloud-made tunnel pulses with a bunch of different colors, and lightning bounces randomly within. It's called a stratosphere-based portal. Is that literal? And appears over a large thrashing lake. And then a natural satellite, not unlike the moon, slowly goes through the cloudy gate. This all feels contrived and confusing. I'd like to know why this is happening. The natural satellite has the remains of barren, stripped cities torn apart by the wind and debris, which have no people in it for no reason. On one side, there's a great jagged crater that was torn out, and on the other side was a huge chain. Okay, it's Little Planet. Why couldn't the narration just call it Little Planet right away and keep things simple? That'd save us a couple words. Knuckles quickly realizes that the odd rotation of Little Planet would turn the chain segment into a deadly feature. Why? How would he know? Angel Island's on a collision course with it. I guess this was inevitable, and it was more confusing that it didn't happen, since Angel Island has this confusing tendency to constantly fly ahead in an arbitrary path for some reason, instead of just hovering over one spot all the time, like I'd expect. What determines where it goes? It probably flies along wind currents, like Archie implied, but you'd think that would eventually lead into crashing into a mountain. A small pink spark whizzes to Knuckles' side, and in a flash of light, Tikal shows up out of nowhere, looking alarmed. Knuckles starts gliding ahead, and apparently doesn't question her being here at all, even though she's only acted like this in SA1. It's not like she became a mainstay of Knuckles' life, like you'd expect. He spins around, explaining why he wants to go check out Little Planet to send it back. At least it's explained that the reason he's hanging midair just fine is because of the gravitational distortions caused by Angel Island and Little Planet. But wait, Angel Island couldn't have its own gravity. Anyways, Tikal has no faith in Knuckles, and it says that him going to Little Planet would be suicide. She's like Sally, isn't she? I think shipping her with Knuckles would make just as little sense as shipping Rouge with him, because neither would have a good chemistry with Knuckles. A good chemistry isn't arguing 99% of the time. She says they need to evacuate the Chao as quickly as possible. Knuckles reveals that the Chaotix are on the island too, so this isn't Archie fanfiction, since this never happens in the games. And asks what about them? Tikal prioritizes the lives of the Chao more, because if the Chao die, Chaos would want revenge on the world, even though the world would have nothing to do with the Chao dying. But I guess he goes so insane that he'd lash out anyways. Knuckles point out that the Chao won't leave because they didn't when her father's army attacked, which makes me think they're very stupid then. Chaos still being here instead of ascended to heaven at the end of SA1 only makes sense because he was still on Angel Island in Sonic Battle. So Knuckles takes off to Little Planet, somehow thinking he could do something to help, as I wonder why he doesn't just use the power of the Master Emerald to Chaos Control warp it away from him in 3 seconds. Especially since this is Archie Knuckles. So why doesn't he just use his Guardian Deus Ex Machina powers to save the day? It's not a good plot when logically it should have ended in 3 seconds. I mean, it's pretty obvious. The first thing anyone would ever think of when trying to think of how Knuckles could be useful and contribute, besides his game's powers, is, can he use the Master Emerald? Instead, the so-called Guardian completely ignores this idea and glides through the dusty clouds to make a rough landing on Little Planet. And there, he discovers that the air is practically unbreathable, and collapses to his knees wheezing and coughing with his eyes watering over. And then he died. No, he didn't. I don't know why I'm trusting as grim-dark a writer as Flynn to show restraint over this. But the fact is, Knuckles has been one of the main characters since the dawn of the franchise, so we wouldn't kill him off. Even Penders didn't kill him off for real. But logically, there's no way Knuckles should survive this. We're not immediately told that he's using his guardian powers to make a gas mask for himself in a Deus Ex Machina. He has to force his eyes open, and he's still not going to get long-term health issues. Or at least the narration isn't telling us that he will. You'd think it'd be obvious that it was polluted, and he would get a gas mask beforehand. He looks at the entire contents of an abandoned city collapsing and flying at him, and Tikal teleports to his side. At least she's affected by the noxious air too. She staggers to Knuckles. Wait, she's a ghost, isn't she? Why would she be affected by the noxious air? And ducks as a mortar block barely misses her head. She coughs, saying that he has to go now, and he says he can't leave the island. She says it's a lost cause, grabs his hand, and they teleport away just as the remains of the city tear apart their former position. Angel Island smashes into Little Planet. The echidnas could hear screams of Mobian and Chao alike, and the Master Emerald is disintegrated. Gee, he really was biased against Knuckles. I think I take our writer being too favorable to him over the opposite. He's one of the most important characters in all of Sonic. Why shouldn't he get favoritism? Considering Flynn wrote a story where the Master Emerald and Angel Island were literally destroyed, presumably with the Echidnopolis as well, I guess it should come as no surprise that they had Interjack Knuckles destroy Echidnopolis then. And we're lucky he didn't destroy Angel Island outright, because this is how Flynn writes when completely unrestrained. So that's what he really wants to happen. At the very least, this is a fantasy of his that he's writing out. I mean, a guy writes everything that Knuckles ever loved and cared about being destroyed. How can you possibly argue that he cares about this character? You can't. If you apply that to any character, obviously the writer hates them. Imagine if Sonic had his entire planet destroyed and all of his friends destroyed. Then we cut to Sonic napping under a tree near the train station in the Mystic Ruins, ripping off a video game once again, since this was from SA1. And he complains that there's nothing exciting going on today. We're told that the past 6 months have been really boring for Sonic. After the defeat of Perfect Chaos, Sonic had been interviewed by every news reporter worldwide. Every single one? Does he not realize how many reporters that would be? There's no way Sonic would have the patience to put up with the same basic interview over and over again, like hundreds of times. He'd get bored after the same question was asked to him the second time. And it brought back memories of when he had defeated Robotnik for the first time. Wouldn't it be interviewed that much every time while they're at it? Sonic had once again been a household name. You mean he stopped being one? Fuck this. This wouldn't happen. This is obviously from meta logic, where Sonic became famous again only after SA1 came out, because Sonic stopped being super famous during the post-Sonic 3 days, like the first Dark Age. Of course, the narration tells us that people held funerals for those caught in Chaos's flood, since this is a tragedy writer. And we're told that what Sonic usually did for fun had become repetitive too, and a bit of realistic writing for a change. Every zone he could access had been memorized, and every badnik within was destroyed. Yeah, realistically Sonic would have done that with his super speed. It really shows how biased this writer is in favor of the games when he insists on setting his fanfictions in the prominent settings of SA1, and ripping off the story content of the games, even in his fanfictions. And the problem with that is that the game's continuity is so barren and empty of lore compared to stuff like Archie that there's no real reason to focus on it, when you could focus on literally anything else in Sonic. An Archie fanfiction shouldn't be focusing on Sonic hanging out with the Mystic Ruins. He'd be a knothole more than anything, and have no actual reason to be in the Mystic Ruins. Remember, I said it was an Archie fanfiction because Knuckles said that the Chaotix were on Angel Island. But so unlike Archie otherwise that it's very easy to forget that. I do love being told about the realistic aftermath of SA1 though. The egg carrier isn't any fun anymore because the sky deck is completely underwater and ruins. Sonic and Tails had scoured through the entire ship, presumably in scuba suits or submarines. But there's no sign of Eggman or any further threats. And Sonic had gone through the base in the Mystic Ruins a dozen times, and it was clean of all its badniks too. A dozen times? That's paranoid and desperate. We're told that the rebuilt silver and metal Sonics there did give them the creeps. Wait, so they didn't remove them from the base and do anything with them? And all those times of visiting it? Realistically, Tails would take out the robot Sonics and reprogram them to be good, and carry a ray gun with him the minute he tries to remove them from their tubes, just in case they immediately try to attack him. At the very least, he would use them for scrap metal. He sees metal. That would save him money. They wouldn't just leave the robot Sonics there begging Eggman to come retrieve them. The narration expects us to believe that there's no way for Tails to activate the robots, because of a vague explanation that Tails had gone through every available console. What's that mean? There's nothing Tails can't do. There's almost nothing Tails can't do. I would draw the line at making a computer out of dishwater, of course. But still, he would take them to his lab and reprogram them and reactivate them no problem. And without an explanation that Eggman was injured or in a coma or in another dimension, it's impossible to buy that Eggman wouldn't be doing anything to make Sonic's life exciting in 6 months. Especially when he's got perfectly usable robot Sonics in his base. He would have used them in all that time. Archie is better because the minute the SA1 arc ended, it had Eggman send that Silver Sonic Mark II against Sonic, which made sense. It showed careful thought and care put into the writing, and unparalleled respect for SA1's concepts. It's like Eggman would not be patient enough to hold back on an evil plan or elements for an evil plan for 6 months. I mean, I guess he must have been kinda like that in Sonic Heroes, because how long did it take him to make all of those egg carriers for the Egg Fleet? But like in AOSCH, if Robotnik had the patience to hold back on an evil plan and try multiple evil plans at the same time, he would have easily won by overwhelming and exhausting Sonic. Now that never happened. Then Sonic sees storm clouds on the horizon which don't seem normal to him. How? They're just storm clouds. He dashes to the roof of the train station and looks out to sea, smirks and says bingo, because that's how this heroic hedgehog reacts to something bad going on in the distance. He goes to Tails, who's on a ladder reconstructing the tornado too. Wait, when did it get damaged? Sonic greets him, he turns off his blowtorch and lifts up his mask, And out of nowhere, Tails says that he's scrapping the tornado, despite being attached enough to it to call it her. Even though SA2 had him use the tornado too. Was this written before SA2? He's just gonna casually scrap it to make a Tornado 3 instead of repairing it. Sonic whines that he needs it right now, and Tails says that he needs a Chaos Emerald to power it because the emeralds have disappeared to new zones for no reason at all. Wouldn't they just stay where they were when Perfect Chaos was defeated? And the heroes would just collect them. This is why it doesn't make as much sense to have only 7 emeralds. They're forced to have the same emeralds be in new hidden areas at the start of every game. And the only contrived explanation they can muster up for it is, they're magic, so they warp there for no reason. And I don't think that's even been explained in canon. I think people just assume that. It'd actually be simpler if there were tons of different emeralds. Why are there so many times when an entire paragraph is dedicated to one line of dialogue? That's not how you make paragraphs. And you definitely shouldn't have the dialogue not tell you who's saying it every single time. This guy got hired by Archie? Even my fanfictions are written way more professionally. Sonic asked Tails if he could modify the Tornado 2 to take the rings. Tails is somehow insistent that rings would make something even more unstable than Emerald would, even though rings would have less energy than Emerald. And he says that he'd need 200 rings at least to get Sonic anywhere. If you can get rings to power anything you want just by collecting them from a random region where they spawn, Mobius shouldn't have any sort of energy crisis. And at that point, there's no excuse for Eggman using polluting energy sources other than sheer spite. And this goes for Earth too, because apparently Earth has to have rings in the Sonic universe, because SC1 takes place on Earth, and there's rings all over the place there. Yeah, the regular human world has rings. Sonic runs off to Windy Valley Zone as I changed my mind about it being an Archie fanfiction, since if it was, why does Tails have a workshop all the way in the remote Mystic Ruins? And why doesn't Sonic just go get a spare plane from Rotor? Then we're told that Amy isn't sure what happened to her or where she was. She groans and thinks that the clearest point she could remember was months ago, when she watched Sonic fight Perfect Chaos. Flynn had an original idea for once, as he makes up a sister city to Station Square called Silicone Central, where most of the destroyed Station Square survivors went to. At least there were thousands of survivors. But, like, the clearest point she could remember was months ago? Was she in a coma? Amy had helped in recovery, but Flynn's only idea for doing that was that she'd do a bunch of shopping. 'Cause that'd make products sell and help an economy. When I read Amy had helped in the recovery, I thought about Fleetway Amy being a competent hero in her own right. And I guess I assumed she would be helping rebuild Station Square. Not just being a stereotypical girly girl doing tons of shopping because she did in one cutscene in SA1. It's weird how a writer who's accused of liking Amy too much doesn't really do a good service to her character ever. Well, Fleetway wrote her the best it ever did, and its writers didn't like her at all. The narration says that she'd been shopping so much that she became a legend, and I have to wonder if she's secretly rich with a family fortune, because how would she have the money for that with no job? And I don't see why the government would be giving her that money as hero reward money, because she's not an independent hero who's constantly feeding bad guys in the games. Or at least we're not told that. Then when she was shopping, the inside of her entire psyche had exploded. She heard whistles and bells, seen bright flashes of light, and collapsed. And the entire world went slow motion. Huh? That was arbitrary. The last thing she could decipher was a soothing voice and a pair of strong hands, and she was lifted into the air and passed out. Now she's in an apartment with a true appreciation for the arts, order, and fashion. She pulls her blanket over her shoulders and sits up to take in more of the view, and a human carrying some tea walks into the room, calling her a mysterious Mobian, because apparently he doesn't know her actual name. Maybe fangirls of Sonic like her are so common that nobody remembers Amy Rose? He asks her how she's feeling as he sits on a coffee table in front of the couch Amy's on. He's sitting on the table? At least this time, Flynn bothers to give an important civilian a name. Jonathan Potter. I'm sure I'll remember that. He says he saw her collapse and helped, and he didn't know if the local emergency rooms could care for Mobian patients. This is exactly why it makes no sense that any of the Mobian characters would want to hang out in Station Square all the time. They'd be with their own kind. Especially in the game's canon, where apparently now there's a human world and a Mobian world. So if the heroes could travel between the worlds whenever they want, they'd have no reason to ever stay on Earth. Amy naturally says that human and Mobian's physiology are very similar, and thanks him for his help. I was worried that he'd be a bit of a predator towards her, where he kidnaps her, and I thought he was the one who caused her to pass out. So at least that's not the case. But then why did she pass out? That's not... You have to explain the premise of the story. I mean, Amy isn't exactly known for having seizures, or whatever. Amy says she's not sure what happened to her. Is the writer? Amy says that after Eggman attacked her home world, she came with Sonic back to Earth and started her life here, worshipping the game's canon once again. Why would Sonic prefer to live on Earth? He doesn't belong there. It made sense in Sonic X because he was staying there to humor Chris, and he thought he was literally trapped there. It doesn't translate to outside of the anime that I guess the adventure games were actively promoting that promote the on Earth idea. Somehow this human is surprised that Amy doesn't come from Earth, and she says she came from Little Planet, as opposed to Mobius. Which does make sense since you first saw her in Palm Tree Panic on Little Planet, regardless of what the manual might say. It's at least interesting that she says the Time Stones keep Little Planet stable in and out of the time stream, but it's also confusing. Eggman attacked Amy because he wanted the Time Stones. But he never attacked her, just kidnapped her, with Metal Sonic. And how would that bring him the Time Stones? It's not like she was the guardian of the Time Stones, and it's not like they were infused in her aura. That would have been too interesting and made her too competent. She also says that Little Planet became a wasteland, as opposed to being helped with all the damage to it being reversed, like the actual game's good ending tells us, and like SDC tells us. But Flynn insists on going for the dark and edgy route to be spiteful, which is especially weird here because Little Planet's a game concept this time. Well, I guess when it came back in Sonic 4, it didn't exactly look like it had been given a good future, but we assumed that was because Eggman had recently metallicized it. Then Amy explains why Little Planet's never really been seen again. The Time Stones were disrupted, so it doesn't come out on regular intervals anymore, so it hasn't come back in the past few years. Disrupted? How? How do you disrupt magical cosmic keystones permanently? Huh? Then we're told that in the dark, mystic ruin egg carrier base, a bulbous green robot walks in, looks at a console, and this results in a bunch of beeping and lighted activity. I refuse to believe that in 6 months of the base being totally unguarded and lifeless, Tails wouldn't have completely dismantled it for spare parts. This part of the plot wouldn't have happened. Its entire basis is the characters being complete idiots. 2 pairs of eyes light up simultaneously, an orange pair and a red pair, and the glass chambers hum open, and the 3 leave the base. 3 robots, I guess. What took so long? So, because Dieball Ex Machina, some random robot releases the robots in the base. But this wouldn't happen! Tails would have taken the base apart! How complacent is he? There's just a huge amount of free metal lying around that he doesn't have to pay for. Why wouldn't he dismantle Eggman's base? And if not him, Gun would have done that. Gun would just let Eggman's former base stand there. If nothing else, you'd think tourists would be constantly swarming it and taking selfies in front of it. And Gun wouldn't want people to risk their lives going to that base. Sonic shows impatience with Tails taking a while to make the plane start flying, and both Sonic and Tails mutter angrily about each other under their breath, which isn't exactly a good friendship chemistry between them. Tails is super cautious, getting irrationally worried that their plane will get lost over the ocean and the thing will break up. It's pretty cowardly of him, but I guess it's good to have him contrast against Sonic to further justify his existence, to make himself less redundant. But Antoine or Sally would suit this role a lot better. Tails is supposed to be Sonic's best friend, so he's supposed to have a good dynamic with him. And having a character that's supposed to be the cautious one is good for freeing us room for Tails to have tons of faith in Sonic, and give us the heartwarming dynamic they're supposed to have. You don't have to be focused on Tails contrasting Sonic as much as possible if you can have a cautious character there, so that Tails can be on the same wavelength as him just fine while also being a genius. The plane takes off from the runway, and Tails insecurely wonders if he even programmed its ring meter right. I prefer him being an insecure genius over a punchable one, but logically he has to have some confidence, because if he was too insecure about his ability, he wouldn't be trying to engineer at all. As they flew towards the tremulous sky, what a pretentious word that was, neither of them noticed the 3 robots making their way to the fallen egg carrier. Amy just misses the plane taking off and wonders how she's going to get to Never Lake. The train system doesn't run to it, even though you'd think it would be a tourist attraction. Well, there's an explanation for that. She had heard on the radio on the train that officials had banned all flights and crews to the area due to unexplained phenomena. She's pretty delusional if she thinks she could even accomplish anything worthwhile on Little Planet. All the games Amy usually does is get kidnapped, or swing a hammer at something, but Sonic could achieve the same effect with a spin dash a lot better, without the risk of getting kidnapped. So she's just bogging down the pacing of the plot when she's not going to do anything that matters. She notices that something had torn apart the raft she'd used to get to the egg carrier, remembers the large fellow she had seen when Perfect Chaos attacked, goes up the ladder, and launches herself in a minecart to get to an ancient temple. Why does she think she has to find Big the Cat? What could he do for her? She goes through the jungle following the river, remembering that in the celebration over Chaos' defeat, Big had told her off-screen that he lived along the river. I guess she asked him where he lived because she's a naturally social person, even though in most continuity she doesn't care about anyone not named Sonic. So more likely Big told her that unsolicited, because he's lonely and wants a friend. The narration says that Amy thinks of Big as just a simple person living on whatever life gave him, and wanting nothing more, as opposed to stupid. That doesn't prove he's not stupid. Why would the writer think he isn't? Thinking Big the Cat isn't dumb? That's like thinking Patrick Star isn't stupid. She finds him playing checkers with Froggy, somehow. How would anyone think Froggy could play checkers? And yet he's winning. That's not funny, it's stupid. It's just a normal frog, it wouldn't play checkers. At least this gives Big some depth because he taught Froggy how to play checkers, so he knows how to play it. Even I don't know how to play checkers. That's how you're supposed to write a one-dimensional character. You improve on them by giving them a hobby or something. I wish Flynn did that with the Destructics. Amy asks if he has a boat she could borrow. Why is she assuming he'd have one? I mean, sure he's a fisherman, but he's never had a boat. Big says that Never Lake is down the river, and Amy's surprised because in all her life, she never knew it was even connected to the main land. He says he goes to fish there sometimes, and asks to take her there. Then he says he wants to catch some fish in case they get hungry, and Amy wants to get there immediately. I like that moment. Somehow he's able to understand what the non-sentient Froggy is saying. So, Froggy is sentient in this story, but somehow only Big can understand him, which was true in the X comic too. It's so arbitrary that he can't talk then. Big plans on riding the fast current of the river to get to Never Lake. All of a sudden now it's different from the games, just to justify the plot progression. They go down a waterfall, which also wasn't in the game. Then Sonic and Tails see Little Planet, and the portal it came from had arbitrarily remained open, spewing lightning. The tornado tube bucks in the wind, nearly throwing Sonic off. Tails says he's caught in Little Planet's gravity, and they could get torn apart. As he and Sonic panic, Tails makes a long mechanical arm come from the back of the plane and lifts Sonic as the plane changes forms. A rocket engine kicks in, and the plane blasts away from Little Planet. But for no reason, Sonic and the arm fly off the back and hurtle through the brown skies. The remains of Eggman's chain on Little Planet, which broke off for no reason, get sent towards the plane, tearing off the 2 right wings. And Tails jumps from it and flies to Never Lake just as the plane explodes. He ducks behind a rock, seeing Knuckles in the distance, and the explosion alerts Knuckles to him. Then Sonic snarls, "If I get out of this alive, I'm going to kill Tails." It's not his fault. Flynn really writes Sonic as a jerk in this story. At least Fleetway Sonic has hilarious, sarcastic snarks all the time to make up for that. Sonic uses each chunk of rock or building in the higher altitudes of Little Planet as a launch pad, somehow, leaping his way towards the ground. But his movements are greatly hindered by the mechanical arm that's still gripping him. He rides something until it hits the ground, coughs and whips the dirt from his eyes, and we're told that the atmosphere is atrocious. Sonic would have long-term health issues from breathing in poison like this. With a loud howling sound, Sonic feels Little Planet briefly stop rotating, only to start rotating from south to north, as he dodges the debris of former cities falling from the sky. What's with the portrayal of Little Planet as this weird, dangerous nightmare location? Sonic says, definitely gonna kill Tails. This writer really got their friendship, didn't he? That explains why I made them fight in Archie. As Little Planet speeds up, some of the incoming debris stops and gets flung back into the brown sky. Sonic fights for every breath as he runs with the turning of the planet. And with another howling noise, the planet slows. One of the few cities still standing becomes the next to fall, as I'm constantly wondering why these cities are crumbling. Not to mention why no one's living in them. Amy came from there, so it has to have been populated recently. Or would that be too dark? Is Flynn implying that Amy is a genocide survivor? Like Eggman killed everyone on Little Planet, or roboticized them? Why is the planet's rotation so weird now? The planet starts rotating north-south, and the entire city as rubble starts hurtling towards Sonic. This is interesting, but confusing. Like Penders' work. Sonic tries to back up and run away, but the mechanical arm attached to him buries itself in the ground. And he complains, definitely gonna kill Tails. Flynn didn't need to have him say that again. It's probably just him bluffing because he's mad at him, but if he repeats it, it's awkward. It makes him sound like he's serious. Meanwhile, Amy holds onto the leg of a bed as it rockets down a river with Big, who had inflated his belt and was behind it, pushing faster than ever. And Amy wonders why the water is moving so fast without being completely white rapids. But the writing doesn't bother to explain the plot hole it unnecessarily created. It just says that a lot of weirder stuff has happened on Earth. It'd make way more sense if it was Mobius then. Why would Earth have stuff like loop-de-loops? They see a glimpse of Little Planet and fall down another waterfall, which is normally lethal, and the water flows into an underground cavern. Big says that it takes a minute to surface, so they better hold their breath. Normal people can't hold their breath that long. Amy hugs herself, chilled by fear. So at least that makes her more sympathetic, and she holds her breath. Naturally, the sudden blast of cold water and the impact nearly makes her lose it. If this was written realistically, she would lose it. They resurface in Never Lake and see Sonic, who's at the south pole of Little Planet being swung mercilessly. And he would have been flung to his death if it weren't for the arm keeping him in place. Big says that he'll help him because he helped save Froggy, even though he didn't. It was Big who saved Froggy, and all Sonic did was freeze chaos. He can't even get the continuity of the game straight. At least it's nice to see Big use his fishing lure for something helpful. He puts the lure just above Sonic's head, Sonic tugs it, and the arm doesn't let him go any further, causing him to panic and saying, "Tails is so dead!" Just as Little Planet starts to change course. The whole time I've been running under the assumption that Eggman's making Little Planet act this weird. Cause who else would pollute it like that? Little Planet stops, some debris smashes into the ground next to Sonic, which frees him. Big's upset because his line got broken by all those things in the air over the planet. Sonic flies closer to the debris as Little Planet starts to spin again, and he's scared when he realizes the line had snapped. And Little Planet's gravity starts to claim him again. Then out of nowhere, it turns out he's been holding a crystal ring. Holding, as opposed to wearing on his wrist. But I guess I should have expected he kept it because of all the SA1 references. Why wouldn't he still have it? But it was never mentioned until now. So I was pretty surprised when he used the crystal ring to blast over to Never Lake in a Deus Ex Machina. I love that it's taking advantage of the crystal ring in actual story for once, but it came out of nowhere. Big at least gets to be helpful by lifting him out of the water, and Sonic coughs and thanks him. And Amy hugs him, which he lightly returns and says, "Hey Amy." Well, that's sweet. I'd much rather see him react to Amy like this. So what's with him being a jerk during Worlds Collide? This is how Flynn writes them when he's completely unrestrained. He's being a good friend. Then Froggy frantically croaks and jumps and points at the water beneath them. A frog can point? The chain swung through the water, tearing up the ground beneath it, and smashing into the water again at a deadly rate. Amy tells Big to cast a line out to shore so it latch onto something. Something good about the story other than the inventive portrayal of Little Planet is how all of the characters are taking the situation seriously. Even Sonic is panicking. But that's a basic thing I'd expect from any action series. It's still better than the games though. Then Knuckles has to reassure Tails that he's not going to hurt him. And Tails whimpers, "You promise?" He really doesn't trust Knuckles. Even though Knuckles only ever betrayed Sonic, not him. Instead of him simply saying that he's his friend and would never hurt a little kid like him, Knuckles just says that he's a good fighter and has nothing to worry about against him. That's oddly humble and nice of him. Knuckles sadly tells Tails that Little Planet crashed into Angel Island. And Tails gasps and says sorry, so at least they're portraying this awful thing that happened to Knuckles with a proper gravity. Well, I say awful, but it's only awful from Knuckles' perspective. He'd be better off without Angel Island, so he can actually have a life. Problem is, in Fleetway, he'd rather go down with the island and get himself killed. And he tried to do that in this fanfiction. So Knuckles has a pretty real risk of wanting to end it all, since this is the kind of Knuckles who actually cares about guarding the Emerald. Then they see their friends near Never Lake and the coming danger of the chain. Tails shouts to pull them in and begins frantically pulling in the line. Big hands a fishing rod to Sonic and jumps into the water behind the bed and pushes them to go faster, telling them to not let go of that line. It's nice to see Big acting independently to be useful. This is an exciting and engaging story. The bed's reduced to splinters, and Knuckles only manages to pull in Big's rod. He mourns that he's failed them too, and Tikal shows up out of nowhere saying that they're not dead yet. If she can just show up to Knuckles, why isn't she always with him? And how psychic is she that she knows when exactly to show up? She turns into the pink sprite and flies to the chain. I like that she's taking advantage of her game ability by going back and forth between her two forms. Sonic and his friends cling to the swinging chain that starts going down to Never Lake. They get dazzled by a flash of light, and Tikal clings to the chain with them, and she tells them to link hands. There's another flash of light after she grabs Sonic's hand, and a single sprite flies from the chain as it arcs through the water, and she teleports the heroes away from the chain safe and sound. So she used to check up his gunmen, saving them with her teleportation power. Why didn't she do that a lot earlier? If she was psychic enough to know they were in danger, what took her so long? At least Flynn did thanks to the character's teleportation to save the day. I like that Knuckles shows his unique dynamic with Sonic by teasing "nice belt" about the mechanical arm stuck to his chest. Sonic's confused at first and then glares at Tails, but that's immediately forgotten as Tikal tells him Knuckles has dug a protective trench, off-screen. And Tikal says the chain will stop hitting water and hit them if they don't take refuge. So they all go into the ditch, and thanks to Big being helpful, Sonic finally gets rid of the mechanical arm on the shore of the lake. I like seeing the mechanical arm used for something else for a change. Then out of nowhere, they all get knocked out with green gas. Sonic was the first to wake up, and from the sound, he guesses that Little Planet's getting more violent. He sees Silver Sonic standing over Amy and not looking at anything in particular. The ordeal on Little Planet left Sonic stiff and lightheaded thanks to the pollution on it, so at least the pollution had some realistic consequence. Oh wait, Flynn probably meant the gas as in the stun gas Eggman used on him. Never mind. The rest of Sonic's friends wake up, with Amy somehow being the last to wake up. Realistically, knockout gas would affect the ones with the smallest weight the most, so Tails would be the last one to wake up, followed by Amy, and Big would wake up first. How could Eggman have possibly been able to safely knock out all of them when they have radically different weights from each other? The amount of gas he'd need to knock out Big would kill the rest of them. What an overly convenient plot device for him. We're told that Amy keeps a tiny capsule in her glove, and with a flick of her wrist, it magically turns into the long hammer. And she makes Silver Sonic come crashing down because of it. At least Flynn tried to justify it. Eggman taunts the heroes through an unseen speaker and says that E-106 Iota is on Little Planet gathering the shards of the Master Emerald. Wait, I thought it got disintegrated, not put into shards. And Metal Sonic's up there gathering the Time Stones. And he plans to use the energy of these magical jewels to not only control all of time, but become an omnipotent immortal. Like an SDC. Instead of the heroes taking Eggman's vicious, evil plan seriously, Knuckles just makes an egg pun that he cracked, and everyone laughs. Tikal says they don't have time for this, and I promptly wonder why she's not immediately teleporting the heroes to safety, and then teleporting the robot Sonics to a volcano. She could solve the entire plot in seconds by herself. She's just as bad as Shadow in that respect. Instead, this whole plot will be forced. Silver Sonic punches Amy, and Big throws it into the ocean. I love how useful Big's being. Everyone notices the egg-shaped pot in the ocean, and a speaker comes out of it taunting them with Eggman's voice, and Silver Sonic marched his way back onto land, being inaccurately described as a giant badnik. I should have known he wouldn't have been defeated that easily. But logically, he would be beaten easily. Why doesn't Tikal just warp him to a volcano? Knuckles tells her to take the others to Little Planet and stop the other robots. Okay, so the writer thinks Sav would do that. I guess the plot will be dragged out anyways, though. Knuckles has no reason to tell Tikal to leave him and Big to fight Silver Sonic. Logically, Tikal should just warp Silver Sonic away from them. But instead, they have to dodge some rockets that Silver Sonic somehow kept in him. Tikal's hoping that Amy's ability to talk Gam into being good will come handy for making Iota become good. And Chaos if they run into him. That's kind of pushing her luck though. Can't she just teleport them away? Sonic and Tails are going to search for Metal Sonic and gather any time stones they can. Since Sonic can run at over 700 miles per hour, you'd think he'd just find all of them really quickly. Then Sonic comments on how the air on Little Planet isn't polluted anymore. And Tails technobabbles it away by saying that maybe the planet's screwy gravity cleaned the air with centrifugal force, sending the pollution away from it from sheer momentum. If that's the case, how does it hold on to any atmosphere? Then they skid to a halt because Metal Sonic's hovering in front of them. Sonic tells him, "You just sealed your death warrant," and smirks. Sonic's pretty evil in this story. Since when does he say stuff that dark? At least Flynn had the sense to make Metal Sonic talk this time, though it's generic evil villain dialogue that's trying too hard to be menacing, so we don't gain anything from it. But at least he's not totally boring, just wasting our time. And we briefly get our time wasted by the story revisiting Knuckles fighting Silver Sonic, and I say our time's wasted because we're given basically no details on the fight at all. All that happens is that Silver Sonic gets out of the ocean again. Amy and Tikal find a green piece of metal, revealing that some debris had destroyed Iota. And Amy says she can't find anything left of the Master Emerald, so they completely wasted our time. Tikal turns into a pink spark and flies away with her. They left too early though because they didn't notice that Chaos was right there using the Master Emerald to become Perfect Chaos again. The narration has to tell us that all of the Chao on Angel Island were crushed to death. This is totally a writer that's suitable for children. And then the narration has Chaos' plan of purging the world of life to protect the Chao, which are called as children apparently. If Tikal can teleport people, why the fuck didn't she just teleport the Chao away from certain doom? She could have saved them all effortlessly. Guess not. Guess we have to have Chaos be a bad guy in the plot. We're told that Silver Sonic is slowly getting thrashed, but we're not told any details. I guess even Flynn knew how boring a fight between Knuckles, Big, and Silver Sonic would be. After all, the only things they do is punch the robot. We're told that Metal Sonic is playing tag with Sonic and Tails, as opposed to Sonic just repeatedly spin dashing at it, like would make sense. No, instead just run from him. Then Eggman chuckles and presses some buttons for Plan B, already being smarter than most Eggman, as he has a backup plan. Deep under his pod, his anchor starts to gather hydroelectric power. It's novel of Eggman to use clean energy. From the back of his pod comes a satellite dish module with some rings at the tip, and he gathers power from the underwater generators and fires a beam of energy straight through Little Planet. And at least we're told that he has to wait for the batteries to recharge, so there's some balance to it. Wow, that was anticlimactic. The thing that the laser hit was Perfect Chaos. This forced Chaos into the stratosphere. So what was the point of Flynn having all those Chao murdered to make Chaos a big threatening bad guy again, if he was gonna get Chaos taken care of that easily anyways? We're told that it'll take countless years for Chaos to become whole once more, since it got scattered for millions of miles. Knuckles tells Big that it's his turn to fight Silver Sonic, and Big volunteers to be the only one fighting it. Knuckles says, "I really don't see what you guys do in him." That's confusing dialogue. Knuckles flies to Little Planet after some hesitation, and the base of the giant chain falls off. Tails uses the power of the Rhythm Badge to attack Metal Sonic over and over again with his tails. Okay, it's nice that the Rhythm Badge is being used in actual story finally, but I never understood why Tails needed it to spin around and hit stuff with his tails over and over. Metal Sonic flies away the last second. Amy and Tikal come running up to Tails explaining what they saw, and I wonder why Tikal didn't just fly them right up to him instead of them having to run up to him. Tails says that Metal Sonic's got all the time stones, and yet he's not behaving any differently or being any more powerful. You'd think he'd be time traveling, or using Chaos Control to slow down time on his opponents. The Time Stones would have made way more sense to be a source of time-related Chaos Control than the Emeralds. And it sure is polite of Metal Sonic to do absolutely nothing in all the time that the heroes are wasting talking about how they plan to fight him. Tikal tells the heroes to use the golden gloves and ancient light to defeat Metal Sonic. And Sonic says he likes her, and Knuckles agrees. So he likes her for giving him useful advice in the heat of battle. At that point, isn't she filling the role of Sally? Only she can teleport. So she's got a brutally overpowered story-breaking power. It'd be stupid if Sonic didn't promptly decide to have Tikal always be on his team fighting Eggman from now on. Sonic gathers power with his crystal ring, going to a speed dash. He means spin dash, right? And Knuckles flexes, which is apparently what causes waves of red energy to emanate from the golden gloves. I love that they're taking advantage of their upgrades in actual story. But it makes no sense that Metal Sonic's making no effort to attack them, and all the time they're wasting charging up. Just like that, the heroes blast towards Metal Sonic and tear him apart. That was really anticlimactic and easy for them. At that point, Tikal could have warped Metal Sonic to the sun. This is kinda better, but not by much. They hear the chain break, and that's when Eggman fired for the last time. Silver Sonic punches Big in the gut, Froggy jumps into his arms, Eggman fires his laser again, and the chain breaks free of the spinning little planet with tragic events. We're told that it cut down Big, Silver Sonic, and Eggman in an explosion, and Froggy cries after staggering over to Big, or what's left of him. This writer went on to write children's comic books for the Sonic franchise. They hired him because of his talent at writing fanfictions. I guess they didn't read this line. I'm so confused. I'm glad he killed off Eggman because he deserved it, but why would he go through the trouble of doing such a great service to Big the Cat, making him useful in so many ways just to kill him off horribly? Does he like him or not? Well, at least Flynn never wrote any fanfictions where a Sadie M character got this kind of fate. I'm impressed that he showed restraint like that. He somehow managed to wait until the Mecha Sally arc to ruin the lives of Sadie M characters, when I'd expect at least one of his fanfics to be a hate-fic against them. Sonic saw the beam coming, so he grabs Amy in the Time Stones, never looking back. The second beam is described to be so wide that what it did do was, quote, end the lives of Knuckles, Tails, and Tikal. Well, that's needlessly dark. Do you need any more proof that Flynn is a needlessly spiteful writer who hates these characters? I'd never even consider writing that. I could understand killing off characters like Big and Eggman, but why kill off characters that are completely inoffensive? Tails is the third most popular character in Sonic. And with Flynn literally killing off Knuckles in his fanfiction writing, not just another M, but a second time in a fanfiction out of complete nowhere, it makes perfect sense that he had Knuckles destroy Kinopolis. He literally hated him enough to kill him. Twice. And other M, Knuckles was a complete monster. How is that better than Penders again? I'd rather the fourth most important character in all of Sonic get treated with respect and kindness. And giving him a girlfriend, family, a whole group of friends, and his people back is way nicer than how Flynn treated him, where he killed him off twice. Destroyed Angel Island and the Master Emerald. Had him destroy Kidnapolis and become the worst guardian ever. It just seems like common sense that the writer more suitable to the Sonic franchise would be respectful of Knuckles, not treat him like crap. Anyways, as Sonic races across the barren land, Little Planet gives up the good fight and splits apart. Sonic jumps from spire to spire of rock, keeping Amy alive. His foot slips and he asks Amy to save him as he falls into the inexplicable, confusing darkness below. The narration says that since Amy has the Time Stones, she has a chance to fix things. So Flynn would undo the character deaths anyways? That doesn't make up for the fact that he killed the characters in the first place. Speaking as a writer myself, I barely ever did that. You really do have to personally dislike a character to will yourself to write their death, even if it's temporary. Amy wonders what she should do. If she restores things to the way they were before Little Planet appears, that would only make everything happen again. The narration says, did she dare go far back enough to erase Dr. Robotnik from the timeline? Of course not. History was already laid out. To alter that much could make things worse. How? How would getting rid of Robotnik make things worse? A large piece of Little Planet goes flying to the air and smashes Amy's legs, almost causing her to black out from pain. That's pretty spiteful of the writer too. Like, nothing's forcing him to write these terrible things to happen to the characters. But it is still a bit of a creator's pet moment for Amy that of course she has to be the one to fix things, not Sonic. That she's the only one of her friends who never gets killed. She's the one who resets the time to before Little Planet reappeared. She tells the time stones to change it so that Little Planet was simply gone for those years and would forever continue to exist as it had before Eggman messed everything up. I'm confused. Stable time loop? Time travel sucks in stories. So she altered time and reality so that Eggman would never go bother Little Planet again. So Sonic 4 never happens then. Okay, so after there's a flash of light, we get a time skip to Amy getting up from the sidewalk and Jonathan helping her up. And we see that everyone survived perfectly fine. Tails is excitedly telling Sonic about his Tornado 3. At least Sonic has a good chemistry moment with him for once, because he laughs, alright already, you sold me. He plans to race the train to Silicon Central and back, and when Tails tells him to be careful, he amusingly says, why take the fun out of it? Obviously, if he was racing to the best of his ability, he'd instantly leave the train in the dust, so the only way he'd ever be able to race it while being close to it all that time is if he stayed close to it on purpose. We're told that Big One against Froggy and Checkers, Eggman starts putting the finishing touches on programming Iota, as I wish that Amy did the smart thing and altered time and reality so they got killed instead. Then the writer shows how lazy he is again by literally copying and pasting the first paragraph of the story to retell Knuckles' story. But this time around, when he sees Little Planet, it just disappears immediately after showing up. And when Tikal shows up, she doesn't bother to explain why she's here, like saying, I wanted to keep you company. Knuckles asks where she came from, a very good question, but Flynn doesn't want to explain that either, as she just snarks amusingly, a mommy and a daddy, and she explains that she's taking note of a potential threat to the island. Knuckles snarks, what, a beautiful day? I like this exchange between them. Tikal says that she's just learned to appreciate life again, justifying why she's in a funny mood for once. Aside from it being needlessly dark at a few points, this was a pretty great fanfiction. It was fascinating to see Little Planet be portrayed as a nightmarish hell covered in pollution rotating out of control. And fortunately, Flynn went with the simple explanation, and it really was Eggman's fault it was like that. Well, I think anyways. I mean, all he was said to have done was, he sent Iota and Metal Sonic to get the Master Emerald and Time Stones for him. If that's all he did, why'd it rotate so weird? Why'd it get polluted and nearly kill Sonic while spinning itself apart? It was interesting, but very arbitrary. It was really anticlimactic how all of the robots were dealt with. How all of the bad guys were dealt with. Chaos got scattered to pieces by a random beam of energy by Eggman that wasn't even trying to hit him before it could even try to threaten anybody. The fight with Metal Sonic was totally unremarkable, despite him being powered by all of the Time Stones. At least in SDC, he grew into a giant. All the heroes did to beat him was use the Crystal Ring and Golden Gloves against him. And while I did love every time the heroes got to use their SC1 upgrades in a story for once, and that kind of thing reminds me of why I used to think Flynn was a good writer, because he was unlocking the wasted potential of the stories from the games, as if that's hard. The fact of the matter was, if the heroes were gonna beat Metal Sonic that easily, it would have made more sense to just have Tikal warp him to the sun. The minute we were told that Tikal could teleport, the plot should have ended in seconds. She had no excuse not to just teleport all the bad guys to a volcano to throw them to their deaths, and then teleport to the Time Stones to get them back. Then she could be the one rewriting reality, and it'd be much faster, so logically that should have happened. But instead, so much time was wasted on the death trap of a planet that Flynn had the excuse to get a whole bunch of characters killed, just for it to be pointless to the story because Amy undid it anyways with time travel. Big had an especially gruesome death. At least with Knuckles, Tikal, and Tails it was instant. He even got Sonic killed. That's the kind of thing people insult Sonic 06 for. And he killed him in Other M too. Basically the same way. Flynn killed off Big way more gruesomely than 06 killed off Sonic. And speaking of gruesome, it was pretty mean-spirited of Flynn to have all of the Chow that were apparently on Angel Island crushed to death when Angel Island crashed into Little Planet. And even making that happen to Knuckles in the first place was pretty spiteful to him. That's like the worst thing that Knuckles could ever imagine happening to him. You could argue that the Chow needed to be killed to provoke chaos for the sake of the plot, except you couldn't argue that because Chaos never really did anything in the plot, so it was all pointless. Logically, Tikal would have just warped all the Chow to safety. Come to think of it, if Tikal can teleport anything or anybody she wants, she should have just teleported Angel Island away from Little Planet outright, and avoided it crashing completely. So it's official. Every single dark thing in the plot made no sense to have happened. That's the writer of the Mecha Sally arc, alright. To be fair, I did enjoy my time with this story. It was really interesting and engaging. Part of the reason it was so engaging was that, by this point, I know full well that Flynn is not afraid to go dark with his writing, so I didn't trust him to keep the characters alive, especially not after the last story I read of his, where he killed off a little girl. And I was right to suspect that he killed off the main characters, but fortunately he had the restraint to undo it all with time travel at the end. It's still kind of suspect that this is the second time he's pulled this, though. He did this in Other M too, having basically all of the main characters killed off. Even Sonic, who gets stabbed in the back, just like in 06. But oh, everything's fine because Sonic time traveled and saved everybody. Except Knuckles, cause screwed him. And except Sally, cause he doesn't like her either, even though Sonic had plenty of time to go save her. The bottom line is, this was a pretty interesting and engaging story. It's definitely an above average fanfiction. It's just a shame it falls into the same trappings as Flynn's writing usually does, where it goes needlessly dark for no reason, and is forced. And nearly all of his fanfictions have been like this. I don't think there are any fanfictions of his that are lighthearted. Well, aside from the Teletubbies one. None of them have a fully appropriate tone for Sonic. And remember, he got hired because his fanfiction writing was so popular. I really wish I knew if the one who hired him fully read all of his work. It doesn't seem likely. I don't think he would have hired him if he knew about his Teletubbies and Sonic crossover, or the story where Rush's parents got crushed to death, or the story where Shadow made friends with a little girl and then she got exploded, and all the village she was living in got destroyed. Or this one, where Big dies a gruesome death. Or Other M, where there's all sorts of gore, to the point where you get used to it. Now, about the game you're actually seeing here. It's a fantastic game. At least until, like, the roller coaster world, where I just feel like it gets way too frustrating by that point. It just goes from the proper difficulty to endgame difficulty ridiculously early in the game. But I do like it. Ironically, I like its sequel a lot more. And I think I prefer the first game. But I love what the characters are capable of doing. Like, I love the... Like, it's definitely a game of stop and go pacing. Like, you can't just barrel ahead. Partially because you're trapped in the center of the camera a lot of the time. So, there's a lot of times where, like, you'll fall into a pit because you didn't react to it in time and you didn't know it was coming. And that feels like bullshit. And, like, you might run into an enemy because you didn't know it was coming in time. You've got to study the enemies and learn how to deal with each one. Like, there's ones where you can only damage it safely by jumping into the center of them. Like I like the game. I love playing as Dixie and being able to fly. And the music for 2 and 3 are fantastic.